I think because you're particularly interested in slowing down the rate at which we age, I think if I can chat a little bit here about vagal stimulation and how that has been found
Please.
through
Yeah.
sound. Basically, you know that the pinna of your ears, or sometimes called the auricle of your ear, the outer ear in other words, improving the ability of the vagus nerve system to innervate all of the major organs of your body. Many different studies have shown that the vagus nerve has very, very powerful properties in the body if you know how to optimally stimulate it, one of which is slowing down the rate at which you age. Another one that's equally important, let's say, is the reversal of chronic inflammation. What researchers have discovered with optimal vagal stimulation is that it can reverse chronic inflammation in the body, and relatively quickly. There are millions of people all over the world suffering with chronic inflammation and the pain that goes with it, right? If they only knew that by optimally stimulating their vagus nerve, then they could be completely healed. And how do we do that? Well, in the research papers that you could read, they're all doing it.
My guest today is John Stuart Reid, and he may look familiar because he has been on the show before. And if you didn't watch his first interview, you don't have to do it in order. You can watch this one first, but I highly, highly recommend you go back and take a look, because John had an incredible healing experience, a spontaneous healing in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. We super connect in Egypt, but what John is really about is about healing with sound. He's the inventor of the CymaScope machine. And today we are going to dive deep into some healing modalities that may help you or some of your loved ones get some relief from pain and what they're suffering from. So John, welcome. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
It's a great pleasure, Laurie. I've been really looking forward to this second interview for sure.
Well, behind you is the machine that you invented. So will you tell everybody a little bit about what you believe sound and sound healing really is, and why would somebody want to tune in and spend the next 45 minutes learning about what they can do with sound?
Thank you. Well, first, I would never use that term sound healing, because it infers that sound is actually doing the healing, right? But the reality is that only your body can heal itself. What we have to do is to provide the situation where the body is able to heal itself. In other words, we can support it in many different ways. We can support it with good hydration. We can support it with good nutrition, right? Which I know, in both cases, a lot of people really unconsciously, I think, in most cases, abuse their bodies. They're not really thinking about what their body really needs to be healthy. So good nutrition, good hydration. But also, when disease does occur, then most people are unaware that they can actually support their body back to homeostasis, back to a healthy state with sound frequencies and with light frequencies. And these are natural to the body. So it's, there's nothing more powerful than nature, basically. So this is the work that I've been doing. As you know from that first interview, Laurie, I was set on this path because I had a profound healing experience in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, as you mentioned. I'd actually crawled in literally on my hands and knees in great pain to set up an experiment, a cymatics experiment. And but within 20 minutes of starting that experiment, all of the pain left me and it never came back. So, it's a long time ago, but that really set me on this path for two reasons. One was to understand how was it that sound had been able to mediate, to banish the pain within only 20 minutes. Never came back, that pain, by the way, when no amount of analgesic, painkillers had not even touched that pain. It was so severe. And then the other thing was, as you know, the cymatics experiment was so phenomenally successful. We were seeing ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs appear in sand on this membrane stretched across the open top of the sarcophagus. Like, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, really, it was astonishing. And in the moment when that happened, I already shared with you that I really thought this was simply the pain relief, or the pain banishment was the basis of endorphins flowing in my bloodstream, because I was so excited. And whenever we have a peak experience, there's no doubt about it, endorphins, natural opioids, will flow in your bloodstream. And of course, that was probably part of the mechanism, but it wasn't the whole story. So all of these years later, I now understand exactly how that pain was mediated. And in all those intervening years, I also developed the CymaScope instrument, because I thought, if we can create ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus with this cymatics technology, what else can we do with it? How can it be applied in science? So here we see this beautiful instrument right behind me here now. It looks gorgeous, but it's also highly functional. And what it does, we use the surface of medical grade water to imprint sounds vibrations. So it's a little bit, I liken it to like a fingerprint or a thumbprint on glass. If you pick up a glass, here's a glass right here. If you pick it up and put it down and then very, very closely look at the surface, well, you may see your fingerprint or your thumbprint. Pretty unlikely, actually, even though it's there. But if you sprinkle on some fine powder, like talcum powder, then it immediately becomes visible, right? Well, it's a similar kind of thing with cymatics. Cymatics is the principle by which sound can be made visible on a membrane. Now, that membrane, in the case of the King's Chamber, was literally a sheet of plastic, and we sprinkled sand on the plastic to reveal the imprint. In this case, it was literally hieroglyphs appearing on the, in the sand that we'd sprinkled on the membrane. But with water, we don't use powder, of course. We actually use light. Light is a kind of way of revealing the pattern imprinted onto the water surface. A little bit, like I say, like a fingerprint or a thumbprint on glass. So now we can inject any sound into the CymaScope instrument and we can make it visible. We're making a model, if you like, of that sound in geometric form. And it's an accurate model. This is something that can be used in science to look into so many different scientific disciplines. And it is being used in that way, in many different ways. Various labs around the world now have these instruments and are working with them. So I'm very proud to be able to say that I made that discovery and now have actually created this new scientific tool.
John, that's so incredible. So there's so much information you packed in there, and there are a couple of areas I want to dive a little bit deeper into to explore. The first one is the resonance of the King's Chamber. When I talked to you the first time, this is just a concept for me. Since we've talked, I've actually visited Egypt and I was on a private tour. We had the King's Chamber completely to ourselves. I got to be in the Queen's Chamber completely alone with nobody else there. I got to be in the subterranean chamber completely by myself. And I cannot describe what that feels like. That subterranean chamber, it was like there was an absence of sound. There wasn't anything. It's so thick. Those blocks are so thick. People cannot really understand the enormity of what these pyramids are until they're there, and especially being inside. But I know that there is something very special in the energy of that resonance King's Chamber, which was probably designed differently. I don't think the sarcophagus was originally located where it is. I think it was probably in the center. We got to lay in the sarcophagus. There were a group of people surrounding it, making om noises into it. And I actually left my body for a second and came back in when I had my chance to lay in when they were resonating. So there is something that I personally experienced that was very real. You experienced this healing. people in my group saw things, people transformed into one person transformed in front of, there were many witnesses. I was gone. I was in the king's chamber or queen's chamber, so I didn't see it, but somebody transformed into an Octorian, blue, tall being in the king's chamber, in our group, that multiple people witnessed. It wasn't just one person saw it. So I don't know what the pyramids are. You've been there many times. What are these pyramids? What do you think that they were designed for?
Well, I have only just, I'm so glad that you were able to experience that. I mean, that's really astonishing. And now we have a real resonance, you and me, in terms
I
of what
know.
we both experienced. So I'm really happy about that. Well, I've just completed writing an article actually on the sonic aspects of the pyramid in relation to uh, features relating to rebirth symbolism. The pyramids, have been called a resurrection machine by a famous Egyptologist, Dr. Rene Friedman, who I've actually met in Egypt, and a lovely woman, and obviously very, very bright. And she and Mark Lehner, another famous, American Egyptologist, believe that the pyramids, all of the pyramids, were created as resurrection machines. And also, I know Mark Lehner thinks of them as cenotaphs. So, a cenotaph's not somewhere where you bury necessarily someone or you inter them. It can simply be like, this was me, this was my life, here's a monument to me, right? And no doubt these pharaohs had very big egos for sure. So anyway, setting aside this aspect of the pyramid in terms of whether anyone was ever interred in them or not, we just don't know that for sure. But certainly the symbolism, the rebirth symbolism, is very powerful in the Great Pyramid. And I could talk literally the whole of our time here on the rebirth symbolism. One of the areas that I think we should definitely mention in relation to rebirth symbolism are the tools that were found in the northern shaft of the Queen's Chamber. You were there by yourself, right? And you saw those two little shafts entering into the Queen's Chamber.
Yes,
Well,
I did. Yep.
the Englishman Wayneman Dixon in the 19th century, when he walked into the Queen's Chamber, there were no shafts visible, right? And he made the astonishing leap of imagination to think, well, if there are shafts coming into the King's Chamber, maybe there are shafts coming into the Queen's Chamber, but they're hidden, right? The pyramid had been open for nearly 1,000 years by that point, and nobody else in all of that time had had that thought. Anyway, he did, and he went tapping around the walls of the Queen's Chamber, and lo and behold, he heard a hollowness about the same height and position as the shafts in the King's Chamber. So he literally chiseled holes in the wall, right? I mean, they would never allow to do anything like that these days, but he did. And in the northern shaft, he found two little instruments, a little sphere, little circular, spherical ball of stone. And he also found an instrument. And this instrument turned out to be what's termed a pesh-en-kef, pesh-en-kef, sometimes also called a pesh-esh-kaf. Anyway, in either case, what it is, it's a tool, a sacred tool that's used in the opening of the mouth ceremony. And that opening of the mouth ceremony, which is a very famous ceremony depicted in so many different reliefs in Egypt, is all about rebirth. It's all about bringing the pharaoh back to life, reanimating him, right? And the original purpose for a pesh-en-kef instrument, going way back to archaic times in Egypt, was to sever the umbilical cord of a newborn baby, right? So in other words, it's like a kind of, it's like a scissors, if you like, but not in the way that we know scissors, but it's two curved blades that meet at a point, and when they're sharpened, you circumflex it around the umbilical, and that severs it, so the baby can, properly live and so on. So that's the tool that was found in the northern shaft of the Queen's Chamber. And so you can see why, with a lot of other evidence that I could provide you with, why the Great Pyramid is thought of in terms of its rebirth symbolism, a resurrection machine, if you like, right? Now, coming back to your story there about the Arcturian and so on, I must share with you very briefly the story that was told to me by my dear friend Freddy Silva, who, have you heard of Freddy, Laurie? No?
I have not. No, I don't know that name.
Freddy Silva is an Englishman, but now living in America. And Freddy's a great guy. He's a great adventurer, kind of like a,
An Indiana Jones?
That's who I was thinking of. I just couldn't quite get to that name. But anyway, yes, like a kind of modern day Indiana Jones, right? Anyway, so Freddy's a great guy, and he took a group of people into the pyramid, just like you have been recently. And what was extraordinary was that half of the group, about half the group, had to stay in the coach bus outside. They couldn't get enough tickets. You know, there's only so many tickets available. Some people stayed in the coach, including a psychic woman who was with, had been on this tour. The other people went into the pyramid, and they had an astonishing experience when the lights went out. I'm not sure whether, I can't remember in the story whether they were planned to go out or whether they just, the generator failed for a few moments or whatever. But what they all saw, and again, a similar situation to what you described, they all saw very tall creatures come out of the walls of the pyramid, right? Out of the king's chamber, right? Very tall creatures, just like you've just described. And then, but the most astonishing thing here was that everyone saw the same thing, just as you've said, right? And then, even more astonishing is that when they got back onto the coach bus, everyone on the bus had seen the same thing channeled to them via this psychic lady. So everyone saw these tall creatures, even those who hadn't
crazy.
been. Oh, it is absolutely crazy, And again, you can't make this stuff up. This is a real story. It really happened.
I got goosebumps when you said that, John.
Related to this, and I go off on tangents, I know, but if we now ask the question, how can people come out of the walls, of the king's chamber? Well, the walls are made of granite, very, very heavy, dense stone, but also
high crystal, right? High crystal content.
What I was going to say, contains a very high percentage, about 20% of Aswan granite. It's a pinky kind of hue granite, contains about 20% quartz crystal. Well, quartz crystal can store information if it's resonated in a specific way. And I believe that, well, certainly from my own experience from a long, long time ago, where I was able to verify sounds recorded in a wall. So I've, had some experience with sounds, not specifically with visions, but with sounds recorded in a wall that had quartz crystal in them. Because quartz crystals can indeed retain information for thousands of years, right? And when you then re-excite the wall with sound, then you recreate, certainly in the case that I know about, you can recreate sound that was recorded in a wall. And it's perhaps the same or similar mechanism by which literally visions, it's like replaying a video in a sense, and the energy comes literally out of the wall. So, I mean, it is pretty extraordinary. It's pretty, but still very exciting to consider, and just the fact that your group have seen this Arcturian, so did Freddy's group. So it feels very real, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So you showed me a little instrument that you have on the table in front of you that is an ancient Egyptian. I don't know what the sound. Tell me what this is.
This is
like an ankh, right? It's in the shape of an ankh, which is a symbol everywhere.
For sure. And of course, that the ankh is the tree, is the symbol of life, basically, in ancient Egypt. But also, this ankh has been created and fashioned into a sistrum instrument, sistrum, sistrum. Plural is sistra. So if we have many of these, then we've got, a number of sistra instruments. The point is that they have little rattles on them, little, you see, little rattles. I don't know, can you hear that sound? Did you hear it? Okay, you did. Okay.
I did, yeah.
The point is that what I found only about 2 years ago relating to system instruments, I always knew that they produced ultrasound, which is high frequency sound. I knew that from my own studies, but I very excitingly found about 2 years ago a quote from the festival of Opet in Egypt that actually says that you present the system to your nostrils that it may provide rejuvenating breath. Well, the reason I was so excited about that, Laurie, is because of the research that I have been doing in relation to creation of nitric oxide gas in the paranasal sinus cavities. If you create oodles of lots of nitric oxide gas in your paranasal sinus cavities, then it creates vasodilation. In other words, your blood vessels all dilate and therefore lowers your blood pressure. So if you have hypertension and you do this, I get a really strange feeling when I do that. And there's lots of different reasons for that. But anyway, you get vasodilation, but also nitric oxide is very powerful as a pain mediator. So it will mediate pain as well as provide vasodilation. And if you've got vasodilation going for you, you have more oxygen in your bloodstream, because obviously more oxygen, more blood flow, more oxygen, right? And oxygen is the key molecule in the body for healing. So the nitric oxide is a powerful molecule, so is oxygen, and the two molecules combined occur when you do that, right? Well, how did the Egyptians know this, right? I don't know, Laurie, how they knew it, but perhaps they knew it just from experience, in the sense that if you have one of these, and there's a lovely lady called Diane Starling in South Africa who makes these, and this is who I bought this from. Very happy to give you her details.
Yeah, I can put that in the show notes if you want to provide that.
You can post. Actually, Diane Starling also gave me, they said anyone who gives the name John Stuart Reid will get a 10% discount when they buy from her, right?
That's wonderful.
So, that's a nice little gift for people.
I want to add to this because, all right, so I'm so fascinated with anti-aging. And I have said, and I think I may have said this at the beginning, I feel the future of medicine is going to be healing through sound, frequency, vibration, light, right? So you mentioned nitric oxide, and this is something that I happen to know a little bit about. So I'm an expert in red light therapy, okay? So let me tell you one of the things that happens with red light therapy related to nitric oxide. So not only can you use the tool that John just showed you, but I'm going to give you another tip about nitric oxide. So the way that red light works is that it penetrates into the body and it finds the mitochondria and it increases ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy that runs the body. One of the things that red light does that's very significant is it knocks nitric oxide out of the mitochondria and it donates it to the endothelial cells within the blood vessels. It makes them more flexible and pliable. If we're making our blood vessels more flexible and pliable, it increases what? Blood transportation, which then makes oxygen transportation more effective. So you can double whammy. Stand in front of I'm not talking about red light that you're buying on Amazon. You need a panel that has an actual motor that can produce the light and push the light in joules of energy into your body. But you could use that also. You could use a double thing to increase the oxygen transportation in your body. And these are all different healing modalities. So John, you just talked about sound related to nitric oxide. And I just talked about the light. I listened to a doctor on Diary of a CEO who is an expert in nitric oxide, and he talked about some of these things. He did not mention what you just did, but it is fascinating that the ancient Egyptians, who I think were well well advanced beyond what we are, knew of these things, and that you could affect your breath and affect all of these modalities with things as simple as light and sound.
It is astonishing. I'm so glad that you know about nitric oxide. I was actually going to mention light in the sense of a device, a wonderful device called Flex Beam. And again, I can give you a discount code for that.
Yeah, what is that? I haven't heard of Flex Beam before.
Flex Beam is a flexible means of providing red light and near infrared light. As you probably know, it's the near infrared frequencies that penetrate very, very deeply, several centimeters into your tissue. They do produce nitric oxide, but they also supercharge your mitochondria. And I actually occasionally use a flex beam. I have one in our home here, and Elisa's used it recently as well, for pain mediation. In my case, the reason I have this pain in my lower back is simply because I sit for hours and hours at my computer, and very often I'm unconscious about my posture. So after several hours of work, I get up and suddenly, you know, what I've done is I've abused my body. I've abused it, and it's going to let me know. And it's saying, hey, you take notice, guy, you know, you've hurt your lower back. Anyway, I get up from this abuse, go up into our home from the lab here, and then I get the flex beam device, I turn it on. It's very powerful, by the way. You never put it anywhere near your eyes because it's a very, very powerful form of red light therapy. And it's to be used focally, in other words, on a specific area of your body where perhaps you have pain or, you know, some kind of chronic inflammation or whatever. You turn it on and it has a timer built in. I stick it down my pants, literally down the back of my pants. And within 10 minutes, that's 2 rounds because it's the timer clicks off and then you put it back on again. Within 2 rounds, that pain has gone. And I mean gone, it doesn't come back, right? It's like a miracle, really is, Laurie. Anyway, Flex Beam, I will send you a link for a discount on that as well. Getting back to the Egyptians, it is astonishing, but if you buy yourself one of these beautiful Key of Life and rattle it in front of your nose, I'd be really interested to know whether you get the same kind of, it's like I don't know, it's a spine tingling effect that I get when I do that. And I think what's happened here in going back in ancient times in Egypt, when they invented this instrument and somebody at some point rattled it in front of their nose, they got the same sensation and ultimately discovered that it does have therapeutic benefits, right? And of course, it's also a musical instrument, so you can have fun with it at parties and so on, right? But, and anyone can play it. You don't have to have, you know, you don't have to practice or anything. It's just it's a rattle basically, but a very, very beautiful rattle. Anyway, so I'll send you the link for that as well.
I love that. And I think the reason that red light, I'm so passionate about it, is because what it's doing is you have 100 million billion mitochondria in your body. You have cells that have up to 6,000 mitochondria within them. And your body is replacing 1 billion with a B, 1 billion new mitochondria every second of every minute of every day. That's how proliferous they are in the body. So if you can do something that targets the mitochondria and increases its ability to more effectively combine your glucose, which is your food breakdown, with oxygen and increase the energy, which is the ATP, then your body's going to naturally heal. And you mentioned near infrared. So I also want to say that one of the benefits of near infrared is that it can penetrate up to 5 centimeters into your body. And if you stand in front of a red light panel and it targets the large bones in your leg, it will penetrate and stimulate the red bone marrow to release stem cells. And as we age, the amount of stem cells in our body decreases, and stem cells can become one of 210 different cells in your body to repair. So we're talking about so many benefits. There are over 10,000 clinical studies on red light. So that's why I believe in it and the efficacy of it. But with sound and then combining these different modalities, you can get healing without having to take a pill, which I think is kind of the gist of what we're talking about, is these natural healing abilities have been around for a long time. Obviously, people used to get a lot of this red and near infrared from the sun, but the sun has the detriment of, you know, cancer and UV lights and UVB, whatever. So it's just a safer way to ingest these modalities.
The other thing I'd really like to, I know we're running out of time, Laurie. I think because you're particularly interested in slowing down the rate at which we age, I think if I can chat a little bit here about vagal stimulation and how that has been found through
Yeah, I don't really know anything
study.
about that.
Okay, vagal stimulation. So basically, you know that the pinna of your ears, or sometimes called the auricle of your ear, the outer ear, in other words, you know, it's kind of shaped like a parabolic dish in a way. It's there to collect sound from the environment. Why? So that you can hear better, right? And if you actually put Mickey Mouse ears like this, then you can hear even better, because you're literally soaking up more sound that way and directing it into your auditory canal. But here's the amazing thing about your outer ears. They don't just send sound into your auditory canal so that you can hear. It turns out that the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body, when it leaves the brainstem, the first place it goes to is the auricle, or the pinna of the ears. In other words, your outer ear. It goes straight there. Nothing to do with your hearing, okay? It turns out, I can go into a long story about this, but nature has done this in order to provide a way of increasing or improving vagal tone. In other words, improving the ability of the vagus nerve system to innervate all of the major organs of your body. So literally, when it leaves the brainstem, it's a twin nerve, it goes left and right, goes straight to the auricle of your ears. Then it goes to the pharynx and the larynx. Good news again, because it means we can now stimulate the vagus nerve vocally, right, by humming or singing. But then from there, it goes to the lungs, it goes to the heart, it goes to the liver, the kidneys, and so on, and the gut. All of these major organs are innervated by the vagus nerve. Many different studies have shown that the vagus nerve has very, very powerful properties in the body if you know how to optimally stimulate it, one of which is slowing down the rate at which you age. I know that you would be very interested in that one. But another one that's, you know, equally important, let's say, is the reversal of chronic inflammation. You know that mainstream medicine is really wonderful for dealing with acute situations, but it's not so wonderful. It hasn't got much in its toolbox to offer anyone who has a chronic illness. What researchers have discovered with vagal stimulation, optimal vagal stimulation, is that it can reverse chronic inflammation in the body, and relatively quickly. Now, the way that this works is because when someone has chronic inflammation, what it really means is that the cytokines in their bloodstream are having a kind of war. It's called a cytokine storm. And this storm is literally the two types of cytokines fighting with each other in a battle. And this creates chronic inflammation in the body. And there is no pill that any medical doctor can give a person to rebalance their cytokines. But these researchers have found, many different groups of researchers have found, that if you optimally stimulate your vagus nerve system, then the cytokines can be calmed down, rebalanced, and the chronic inflammation just goes away. Now, Laurie, there are millions of people all over the world suffering with chronic inflammation and the pain that goes with it, right? If they only knew that by optimally stimulating their vagus nerve, then they could be completely healed. And how do we do that? Well, in the research papers that you could read, they're all doing it transcutaneously, which means through the skin, because your vagus nerves literally go down your neck, right? And by putting little electrical stimulators on the neck, in these various studies, they're showing these wonderful results. However, there is even better news here, because what we're getting here with this electrical stimulation is the piezoelectric effect, which I think you know about. The piezoelectric effect says that if you put electricity into your body, you will create sound in your body because of the transfer. The piezoelectric principle basically means that a crystal, for example, will, if you stimulate it sonically, if you literally touch it, or speak to it or whatever, then it will create electricity. And the reverse is also true. If you put electricity in, you will create sound out. And the same thing happens in your body, because your body, all of the nerves in your body are liquid crystal, are made of liquid crystal. So when you electrically stimulate, then you create sound in your body, and that's exactly what the vagus nerve system needs. It needs sound input. This is how nature provides it, via the pinna of the ears, but not with sufficient power, let's say, to provide a situation where a person has chronic inflammation. Nature did not take account of people that have abused their bodies, let's say, in some way, and created this situation where they have chronic inflammation. However, the good news is that if you stimulate your vagus nerve system via good quality earphones, then the sound goes straight into the vagus nerve system and rebalances the cytokines. And I've made a
little bit on the kind of the thread of talk that we had last time about how we could use different things. Can you remind us, like, when you say a good quality headset, what do you mean?
Yeah, I don't mean earbuds. These little earbuds they're absolutely useless in terms of what I'm saying, because it's the whole pinna of your ear, the whole auricle of your ear that needs to be stimulated, because that's the vagus nerve just doesn't go to one point on the ear. It goes all over the ear. And this is why if you touch your ear anywhere, you'll feel it's really sensitive to the touch. And many people think of it as an erogenous zone, which indeed it is. Right? For that reason, right? Because it's so sensitive. But in this case, no, you need full ear headphones. And the make and model that I recommend is Beyer Dynamic, Beyer Dynamic, DT 770 Pro. They also make one called the DT 770 Pro X. And the X is like a kind of special edition model. But in either case, those are the headphones that I recommend, particularly because they're not hugely expensive. I think they're about $150 or something like that. If you had chronic inflammation, you would spend $150, wouldn't you?
Heck yeah.
To get fixed up. And the way that this works, I cannot remember on our last conversation whether I mentioned the audio heterodyne effect and the list of albums that I've discovered.
Yes. And that was one of the things that you provided for me, and I put in the comments in the show notes of our last video.
Well,
so that's
what
in there.
You need. Any of those albums provide very low frequencies when they're played, that then stimulates the vagus nerve system. So anti-aging, or slowing the rate at which you age, reducing chronic inflammation, banishing it if you do it right, okay, altogether, and the pain that goes with it, improving sexual libido, in other words, stimulating your sex glands as well, also if you have any kind of mental problems, mental illness problems, it helps with that. It also helps with menopause. There's a whole long list of ways that vagal stimulation can support the body in healing. So it's a really wonderful way for people to heal naturally. Again, thinking about it, nature provided this tool, didn't it? Taking the vagus nerve straight to the pinna of the ears. It was like saying to us, that's what you need to do to support your body naturally for healing.
Beautiful. And if you take your shoes and socks off and you go stand outside and you earth, grounding yourself, you can further reduce the inflammation in your body. There are lots of studies around that as well. So you could have a double whammy of putting these headphones on, listening to this low frequency music and standing on the earth to reduce inflammation even further.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's no question about it. Standing on Mother Earth definitely completely neutralizes free radicals in your body, but it's only a temporary thing. You know, you'd have to be
Right.
standing on the Earth all the time. Otherwise, you know, free radicals build up in your body naturally as a natural aspect of metabolism. They're there naturally. But normally, as you say, you know, if you were standing on the earth, like in the days when before the invention of shoes, people would be standing on the earth, or they might have put leather on their feet to protect their feet a little bit. But leather also is effectively, especially when it's a little bit damp, it's a good conductor of electricity. Therefore, again, standing on the earth with even with, you know, damp leather on your feet would still neutralize the free radicals in your body. But these days, you know, we all go around with socks and shoes, don't we? You know,
And
so
rubber soles, right?
yeah, so these free radicals tend to build up in our body. One of the ways that we can literally deal with all those free radicals is through diet, of course. We can, you know, leafy green vegetables are another great way to neutralize free radicals in your body. And also in our, Annalise and I have, I don't know if you have these, Laurie, but we have little electrified mats that we put in our beds.
The EMF mats, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
these are little electroconductive rubber mats, and we have them plugged into the earth socket. So as we're sleeping, we're getting 8 hours of, you know, neutral. We're not going to be building up any free radicals in our body. We have these earthing mats in our bed as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and they plug into, in the US, they would plug into the grounding
Yeah, with a
probe
grounding pin. Yeah.
of the outlet. Okay, so we've talked a lot about healing, but you have something new that's coming out related to the CymaScope, which is the sound, and you've created something. So I would love for you to share with your new creation with us.
I would be very happy to do so, Laurie. Well, what this is, you know, a CymaScope instrument you see behind me here, they're very expensive. You can see why. I mean, they're beautifully manufactured and, you know, they're a scientific instrument basically. So they're not accessible, you know, to many people. But what we've now created is a CymaScope app. And you can see here, this is the new CymaScope app, which is very powerful. It covers the whole of the almost the whole of the piano range. And what it's doing right now is literally picking up my voice frequencies. And I think if we've got it, yeah, you probably won't be able to see it, but it's
We can
literally,
see it. I can see that
yeah,
perfectly.
what you might not be able to see is it's actually showing the note, literally the musical notes that are being identified from my voice as I'm speaking right now. So it's
Wow.
literally telling you the musical notes. So what this is useful for, well, it's useful in many different ways, but one of the things it's useful for is learning perfect pitch. So in other words, if someone sings a note to you, you would be able to say, oh, that's E3, right? Because you would have learned it, okay? And this is a tool that allows you to learn perfect pitch, right? In other words, you can identify a musical pitch just by hearing it, okay? And of course, you know, musicians very often have that ability. But anyway, this is also, you know, a wonderful tool for anyone who makes sound. If you're a practitioner, if you're using gongs, Tibetan bowls, crystal bowls, even Cyester instrument, you can make these sounds visible, and then you can mirror this app to a larger screen to show an audience, for example. So if you're sitting there playing your crystal bowls or whatever, then the audience will see the imagery on the, you know, on the larger screen. You can also you can literally play a tune. You know, you can play any tune on here and record it. You see there's a red button here. You can literally record that. So you can record your own playing and then play it back. You can record, if I go back to the microphone activation mode, you can record that and record it and play it, store it in your photo library. Also, if I just cancel that, here we have the burger bar. If I press the burger bar, I can do it here. Can you see it's got articles, it's got videos and so on. So you can literally, can you see that?
Yes.
It's got a whole range of articles there, all built into the app. So, and it's only going to be $12. It's not going to break anyone's bank,
Yeah.
But it's a fabulous app. So yeah, you saw it here for the first time, folks.
I'm getting to see it probably before it's released, because we're at the end of May of 2025, and this is going to come out, I think, in July. So we're going to time this so that hopefully by the time this video comes out, you can go to your app store and pull it down. I'll put the information down in the show notes. John, this is so great. I feel like I learned something new every single time I talk to you. You have a wealth of knowledge and information. I first found you you were interviewed on a show on Gaia TV talking about sound healing and modalities. And it's just amazing to be able to have these conversations with you. And I wish we had more time today. So I'm going to ask you if you'll come back again and talk to us again.
I'd be very happy to, Laurie. I really enjoyed our conversation. You're a wonderful lady. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. That makes my day. And I just want to thank you, John. So before we go, I'm sure people who are watching want to connect with you. So let's make sure that we give them the information. Where can people find you?
Go to soundmadevisible.com. That's the easiest way. That's our shop. Anyone that you buy anything at all from our shop supports our ongoing research. Even if it's something for $5, whatever it is, it supports our ongoing research. And we do have items for $5 because we have articles and so on in the little bookshop that we have on the site. You can also have your voice made visible. We call that DNA voice signature. And you can have it made visible for a loved one. It makes a really great gift. So please contact, go through the shop. Also, we have CymaScope.com, CYMA, and then scope, like microscope. And the CymaScope site is really the research site, and everything on that site is free. It's just, you can, you'll be there for hours and hours reading all that material.
I love it. Oh my gosh. John, I want to thank you so much for what you are doing, for your work for so many years to help wake up the collective consciousness. It is so needed right now. And I'm just happy that more and more people are finding you and your information and what you're doing out there.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It's been a great pleasure. It's a joy always.
And this show is absolutely nothing without every one of you who support us by commenting, liking these videos, sharing these videos. So thank you so much for being a part of this channel. And we'll see you next time. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.